All right, so I'm here with Mark McWatters. He's the VP of Sales over at Ambition. Mark, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Nimit. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, how do you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just snowball from there.
Sure. So I lead the sales org over at Ambition. I've been here almost 3 years. Been leading the team for about half of that time. Um, Trained in the big company sales environment with AT&T for 4 or 5 years. Great experience. Totally different experience than leading a software company sales org, but have a mix of that kind of big training and the little scrappy entrepreneurial, what I prefer, sales leadership.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So, I guess with the topic I want to talk about today, you probably have a lot of experience with. I wanted to talk about one-on-ones, right? So,
Love it.
manager meeting with their rep. I've seen a lot of content around it, and there's a topic that you've spoken about on a couple webinars. So, why is it so important right now to have a very structured one-on-one?
Yeah, I love talking one-on-ones, Nimit. The main thing that people need to realize is most one-on-ones don't actually happen, and that's what I get pretty fired up about. Is this whole like drive-by one-on-one that everyone who's ever worked in sales is familiar with. Hey, Nimit, you good? Yeah, Mark, I'm good. All right, I'll give you 30 minutes back, and it's almost like a celebration. And what happens there is you miss the conversation. And now that we're remote, the urgency and importance of that conversation is even greater. So the one-on-one is a non-negotiable on my team. And we have over 3,000 managers in Ambition that are running their one-on-ones there too. And we've seen the usage even of just our own platform on the one-on-one coaching go up since teams have gone remote.
Wow. Wow. So, how do you structure your one-on-one?
Yeah, so mine, I do weekly. I know some teams do bi-weekly, but I do all mine on Mondays and Tuesdays. Each one's an hour. I really schedule 45 minutes as a way to keep it shorter than an hour. But I stack them all Monday, Tuesday. So if you look at my calendar, it is very one-on-one
Hmm.
focused. Inside the one-on-one, keep it simple. And these shouldn't be how many calls have you made metric reviews with account executives. These should be focused on, really, I like to think about 5 questions, and I can give them to you, I think, off the top of my head.
All
Last
right.
week's highlights and lowlights is question number 1. What call should I join this week or listen to, because we have call recording software, is number 2. What deals can I forecast this quarter, or will you forecast this quarter, is actually the exact verbiage. Um, what's one thing you're struggling with that I can help you on? Is that a deal to advance, is the long question. And then 5 is what else.
Hmm.
So keep it really simple. Your salespeople should know where they stand on KPIs anyway. You
Right.
reviewing that with them may not be very valuable, but keep it simple, an hour weekly, and let the
Hmm.
employee lead the conversation. If you, sales manager, are dictating the entire one-on-one, you're losing an opportunity for them to really buy into what you deem important.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how your questions are open-ended questions, right? It's starting a conversation, and it's getting them to actually have a dialogue with you, which I think is great.
Yep.
Um, so, any advice on the length of the one-on-one, and especially being remote? Everyone's used to having meetings now, and a lot more meetings than they used to have. Is the
Yeah.
one-on-one just like another meeting I got to deal with, or is it more shorter and frequent, or longer and less frequent?
We haven't changed the frequency of ours. We've always done weekly, 45 minutes on the calendar, which is realistically an hour. We've kept that the same, but related is this cadence of we have a Monday morning sales meeting, 1 hour, entire team. I'm on Central Time. It's at 8 Central. Part of my team is on Eastern, so 8, 9.
Mhm.
Then we have one-on-ones. So I like to think about it as a team meeting. You're talking about initiatives. You're doing some public recognition. You're discussing what is the current initiative like COVID and how we're overcoming objections. Then you're going to one-on-one where you reinforce what's being talked about in your sales meetings. And then on Friday, we do a go-to-market recap, which is another way to enforce what's top of mind for the team. So in remote, those 3 meetings become even more important. And as a leader, you have to think, am I driving the most important initiatives? Is my team hearing about these often? Because
Right.
let's call it what it is. Salespeople are the worst at hearing the new thing and then
Mm-hmm.
like getting a call from a deal that it is more important and forgetting what they just talked about, right? So
Right.
I have been that person. I recognize that. And so I think, how do I communicate those initiatives over and over again?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So outside of, the meetings not happening, what's the biggest mistake that you've seen managers make when it comes to one-on-ones?
Oh man. Okay. So yeah, number one is it doesn't happen. Number
Yeah.
two, if it does happen, it's not documented anywhere. So I had this great conversation with Nimit
Mm-hmm.
and, oh, what'd you talk about 3 weeks ago? I have no clue. Right. So it's not documented. If it is documented, is it actually tied to data? Like, do you know if your coaching is working? Is a great question that most people say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I know it's working. And then you ask them how, and they're not exactly sure. And then lastly, is it in, do you have the ability to create action plans inside of that coaching session and have a way to follow up? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, you're going to talk, this great conversation, you have to create an action plan or a commitment to follow up on. And then the last piece I'll say is you always start your this week one-on-one with where you left off last week's
Right.
one-on-one. So
Right.
that's the launching point before you get into the discussion this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, there is nothing more frustrating than having what feels like a really awesome one-on-one. You get through a lot of great stuff and you walk away feeling awesome and then nothing got done. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it from your perspective as a leader too, like imagine
Yeah.
that someone on your team gets out of the one-on-one feeling great, and then you as the leader don't follow through on the things that
Right.
you committed. Because I walk out of almost every one-on-one with some kind of deliverable for me. So
Right.
being accountable, making sure that you follow through on the action seems like everyone knows to do that, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge miss because you're not using some kind of system to keep it top of mind to ensure it
Right.
happens.
Right. Right. So I know, when managers talk about one-on-ones, I feel like they kind of gear it towards their lower performers and they don't spend as much time with their top performers. Can you talk a little about that and maybe how, managers should maybe be gearing their one-on-ones to keep those top performers kind of more engaged and to keep those one-on-ones happening?
Yeah, it's my top performer when I think about I have a unicorn, if you will, on the team. And his main focus that he wants in a one-on-one is he wants deal development. And what I mean by that is he wants to get into the nitty gritty of the big deal that he's having trouble pushing along. Or maybe he's not having trouble, but he just wants to bounce it off me to make sure he's not missing something. Oftentimes, your top performer is the most open to feedback because they're competing against themselves. So they're thinking, how do I get better? I beat everybody every month. Well, you have to focus on that deal development in our case of that's what he wants to make sure he's talking about. He's also
Mm-hmm.
asking me, hey, can I do Chris Voss's masterclass on negotiation? Like, can I do these other things?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with underperformers, it tends to be, are you meeting the activity expectations that we know make you successful?
Yeah.
Yes, that is micromanaging, but that's also the price of being an underperformer. As a leader, you have to make sure they're doing the things that will make them successful. If they're
Mm-hmm.
doing those things, then what's the gap? Why aren't
Yeah.
we? Why are the close rates lower than they should be? What can I do to help coach that individual to close that gap?
Got it. Got it. All right. So last question for you. What's one tip, one piece of advice that managers who are listening to this can take away and implement today in their one-on-ones to make them more successful?
Oh man, if I got to pick one piece of advice, it is, well, I'm gonna put in two here.
Fun.
Document the conversation and create an action plan around whatever that commitment looks like.
Mm-hmm.
In order to truly know you're making strides on whatever the initiative is or the results, like just knowing they closed more dollars isn't a long-term strategy. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in order to document, create action plans, follow up, it will not only advance your team, but advance each individual around things that you know matter to the business. So, It's
Yeah.
not sexy, but it's needed, and it's a big
Yeah.
difference between people who can move the needle with coaching and those who can't.
Yeah, definitely. And when you say document, I mean, that could just be just an email, right? Just a follow-up email, nothing formalized.
Yeah, it could be a follow-up email. It could be in Google Docs. Again, the problems there is they're not tied to data, and
Right.
they're easily get lost. But have it documented somewhere. I mean,
Yeah.
documentation sounds like such a big company thing to encourage, but the
Hmm.
reality is the best sales leaders, the best leaders, period, are documenting those conversations so they can grow upon them, follow up with them, and
Right.
ensure that the right topics are being discussed enough to create
Hmm.
change.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, Mark, thank you so much for all those pieces of advice. That was really helpful. Again, this is Mark McWatters, VP of Sales and Ambition. Check him out on LinkedIn. Give him a connect. He shares a lot of great content, and Ambition themselves share a lot of really great content. Mark, thanks so much again for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Nimit. Have a good one.
You too.